Antony shares his experience of a UK-based charity that purported to support prison leavers in their rehabilitation journey. However, he claims that the charity was a ruse for money laundering. Antony claims that when he tried to expose the truth, he was met with false accusations that saw him returned to prison. However, Antony proved his innocence and was released after 60 days during the pandemic. Now, Antony seeks justice for his ordeal, and he turns to the public for support in his fight for justice.
There are ongoing legal cases around this incident, Antony. So tell me, what is Leather Inside Out?
So Leather Inside Out is a charity that was set up purportedly to help rehabilitate ex-offenders and prison leavers through employment and training.
Yeah.
The charity was set up by Victoria Kate Johns, who is a ex-offender herself. She was convicted, I think, around 2010 for money laundering and fraud. And when she was released, she paid a PR company to publish an article saying that prison saved her from a life of corruption and that she was setting up Leather Inside Out to help other prison leavers in their journey of rehabilitation. And I took a job there, but what we discovered was that she was using the charity as a front to commit further offences and even encourage the very people she claimed to rehabilitate into doing the same.
Wow, that is an awful lot. So tell me, how did you find yourself working at Leather Inside Out?
While I was in prison, I began working for a charity called the St. Giles Trust, and I continued working for them when I left prison. I led a small project that was designed to help divert young kids on youth offender orders away from knife crime and gang life. And I used to give talks in schools, and I really quite enjoyed being in the mentor space and help supporting other people in their journey. But when that project came to its natural end, some time after that, the St. Giles Trust referred me to Leather Inside Out, which is where I met Victoria Johns, and I thought it was another opportunity to further that journey, helping myself rehabilitate and also helping others.
Right. So you said that you've helped others in a mentoring capacity?
That's right.
Right. So what role did you take at Leather Inside Out?
So it's a bit complicated because in my interview and in a follow-up meeting with the St. Giles Trust, Victoria Johns offered me a role within finance to raise money for the charity and its projects. Victoria had lots of big ideas about the kind of projects that she wanted to set up. And I happened to be consulting at the time for a small financial institution, like raising money for private companies. And this really excited Victoria, and she said I could help the charity raise funds. But she told me that I would first need to help them develop their newly acquired retail store. And the goalpost kept changing on that role, and she kept talking about needing to trust me. And it didn't quite make sense. I do understand that there's an implicit level of trust that's involved in any employer-employee relationship, but she was very defensive and evasive when I asked questions, and I realised now that the reason for that is because she was shielding her criminality.
When did you realise something untoward was happening?
Well, there was lots of things. There were things that she said, that Victoria said, and there were things that we later discovered that she had done. So to give you examples, Victoria would often talk about having financiers and investors, and she would boast about owning the building that Leather Inside Out was operating from.
Yeah.
And it's quite an expensive building, but the items that the company was selling were very low value items that were mostly under £1, so it didn't really quite make sense. And when I asked questions about these kind of things, Victoria would panic. You could see the look of panic on her face, and she would shut me down, end the conversation, and then she would often complain to other people that I'd been inquisitive. And she would do it in such a way knowing that it would come back to me and it would show that I was out of favour, of her. So it felt like a very manipulative ploy.
So how were you feeling when you felt that kind of pressure?
It was horrible because, someone will come and say to you, Victoria's complained that you've been asking these questions or you've been talking about this, and it made me feel like I'd done something wrong, whereas actual fact she'd brought something up. I was in conversation with her. I'd mentioned, I raised, a simple inquiry, not in any kind of threatening or, inquisitive way that was beyond the parameters of the conversation, but just generally asking questions. And she treated it as though I had done something really, really wrong, and that felt horrible. And
did that scare you?
Well, It's more that she knew how to create an atmosphere of tension, and over time it started to create a bit of anxiety.
Didn't it?
But it was things that we discovered later that was really the issue. So Victoria pulled me aside one day and tells me that she wants me to help her bring £900,000 from Dubai. And she wanted the transaction to be set up in a very odd manner that put someone else on paper as being the official receiver of the funds, but allowing her to withdraw the funds herself against the presentation of invoices.
Right.
And we later discovered that she was manipulating other members of staff into falsifying invoices. So armed with that information, I put the two and two together and I was like, oh, right, okay, I kind of understand what's going on here. So
And you have evidence for all of this?
I have text messages, I have email correspondence that proves all of this. So I took that information with another colleague and to one of the trustees, Paul, who's here with us today.
Hi, Paul.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And Paul was of course naturally concerned as well, because there was other issues that were happening in the charity, like the staff taxes hadn't been paid and whatnot. So Paul instructed me to look into things a little bit further. Mm-hmm. And I decided to look at the bank accounts of Leather Inside Out. And what I noticed was that Leather Inside Out was receiving substantial sums of money, often tranches of £20,000 several times in a single month. But there was never ever any money being repaid, and that struck me as a little bit odd for them to receiving such large sums of money from loans, but no payments being made.
So what did you do about that? Who did you report that to?
Well, I came back to Paul and I showed him what I'd found, and we also found documents where Victoria had created fictitious agreements and minutes of meeting purporting that Paul's company had agreed to a transfer of $820,000. That was to be paid to one of the trustees, Nicole's company, but directly from their loan provider. So it seemed that Paul was never designed, it was designed so that Paul would never know about it.
Right.
And it said that the documents suggested that Paul was present at the meeting and agreed. And when I took this to Paul, he said he hadn't been there and hadn't agreed. So that's when we started to really, from that point, we understood that what was going on.
Paul,
Yeah.
how did you feel about all of this?
Oh, devastated. I mean, before all this kicked off, before I found out everything that Antony just said, I was dealing with things like Victoria, where staff want contracts. I wanted contracts. She kept putting everything off. I was busy worrying about people's taxes and the VATs being paid. And then this on top of that, it was just devastated, horrible.
Yeah.
Panic.
Did you and Victoria have quite a positive relationship up to that point?
The relationship with Victoria was good at the beginning. I mean, Victoria was introduced to me by my brother. They'd been working together for quite a few years, and they approached me with this idea about the charity, and I thought it was a brilliant idea. They asked for my help, and I said yes. And at the beginning, the first few months, everything was going fine. But originally, her idea, the way she pitched it to me, was they had investors ready to put money into this scheme because it was such a good scheme and whatever. But by the time everything came and the deal went through, there were no investors, and apparently it was all just a bank loan, which I wasn't 100% informed about or told about or anything.
Right. So remind me, what exactly was your role at Leather Inside Out?
At Leather Inside Out, I was a trustee. She put me down as a trustee, and I was also a director of my brother's company, Leatherworks London, which is one of the other companies that she was running.
So as a trustee and a director, what you've said to me just now, implies to me that you weren't able to make any of the choices or decisions or
no choices,
have
no
the input.
decisions. My main role there, apart from being a trustee, was to train people, because the idea as it went on, the idea was that we were going to send tutors into prisons to run courses and start running courses in prisons, which apparently she had half set up and which was going to happen, sort of thing. So my role, realistically, apart from just being the trustees and whatever, was to train people up and whatever. But when I when I spoke to Victoria and brought up things about contracts, bills being paid, and explained to me exactly how all it's working, she just blew me off, saying, "Don't worry, concentrate on the training and the teaching and whatever, and it'll all come together and everything will be fine," sort of thing.
And you trusted that? That reassured you?
I trusted her because Victoria had a relationship with my brother for like 4 or 5 years before this.
Okay.
She actually worked with him or for him.
Okay. Wow, I'm so sorry that you've been through this. This sounds really emotive for you.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you reported this to Paul, and then did you report it elsewhere?
We did, but initially what we decided to do was, well, Paul decided to call the other trustees because, you know, there was 3 of them, and Nicole, and then Paul, and legally they're all responsible for the charity. So the first port of call was to make contact with the other trustees, but they weren't answering his calls. So what we decided to do was to send emails to them where we documented some of our concerns, but not all of them. And the reason for that is because we were suspicious that the charity was laundering money, we didn't want to let them know that we were aware of that, because it wasn't clear whether Nat and Nicole were working or supporting Victoria. In fact, we even believed that Victoria was controlling their email addresses, because I have a recording of Victoria saying that she controls 10 email addresses, and when Paul emailed the other 2 trustees, with my help, I helped write the emails, they never once responded. It was always Victoria responding, and very aggressively, and then she took actions to shut us out and prevent us from being able to complain further.
And you have evidence for all of this?
That's right.
Wow. So what happened? What happened when you reported this?
Well, with the trustees, a week later, Victoria fired quite a few of the staff, blocked my access to my emails and to the banks and everything, and by the end of the month, shut us off completely, changed locks on part of the building where the stock was, so we had no access to that. And by the end of the month, just said that the loan company was no longer prepared to pay the subsidiary companies, and just left everybody unpaid and called it a day.
And she left everyone unpaid just before Christmas.
Yeah, on Christmas, December, no payment for any of the staff.
And it's really odd because the email that she sent suggested that Leather Inside Out was the loan company's primary concern. That's what she said. And it didn't make sense because without the subsidiary companies, one which was Leatherworks London and S&K Camden, which Paul was a director of, there would be no means for the loans to be repaid. So it didn't make sense at all. So it seemed that as soon as we had raised our concerns, Victoria did everything to basically cut us off immediately. And then we started receiving threatening letters from her lawyers. And those letters, well, it was quite clear to me, you know, it was a veiled threat, you know, almost blackmail. So in my case, she highlighted the fact that I was vulnerable on license in the community because I was having the back end of my prison term, which means I'm in the community. She made false accusations against me, Paul, and Paul's brother Antony, and she threatened to report us, and then asked us to sign prepared statements, basically saying that we were exonerating her from any of the allegations that we made. So basically it was, in my case, it was either sign this prepared statement or we're going to file a false report and you're going to prison. And I didn't sign any prepared statements, and she'd filed a false report, and that's exactly what happened.
What did she actually accuse you of?
Well, she accused us of all kinds of things, of being aggressive, making violent threats. She said that pretty much about all of us.
Everyone.
Me, you, Tony.
She said that about you as well?
Yeah. She suggested that we had hacked into the systems and to effect changes. We'd sent unauthorized emails by hacking into the system. Everything you can think of.
Did that scare you?
It did because I knew I was vulnerable, and she knew I was vulnerable, and we were a bit of a standoff. It was like, okay, we both know I'm in a vulnerable position here, and you're looking to compromise that.
Yeah. And just to rewind a bit, because when when the whole of the staff were unpaid, you are obviously a director and trustee here. Did you feel concerned and responsible?
Responsible, yeah.
Did you?
Obviously felt responsible. That's when we went to try and speak to Victoria, which she wasn't around, spoke to the secretary that she had there, and that's the next morning is when she changed all the locks on the other building, so we had no more access and whatever.
So that happened. You were put in that position where you felt responsible, and then you had these accusations made about you.
Yes.
And how did that make you feel?
Not good. Not good at
No.
all. Yeah.
No. And you had positive relationships with the staff.
Yes.
You know.
The staff were very understanding with me and my brother Tony. They knew that we didn't have any control over the money and over what was going on.
They suspected it was
Yes.
not your fault as well.
Yes. I mean, all the staff are quite understanding. They sort of realised as well what was going on. It was meant to be a partnership with everybody, everyone knowing what was going on, but then I think they realised whatever Victoria was doing, me and my brother had no idea what was going on.
We actually have a video of the incident where all of the staff went to the office to challenge Leather Inside Out about why they weren't being paid. And the member of staff, Amber, calls up Victoria in a panic and says, look, all the staff here, they're videoing me and they want to know why they're not being paid. And you can hear Victoria saying to Amber, tell them to talk to John McClellan. And John McClellan was the head of the finance company financing the charity, providing the loans, the fake loans. And they just kept repeating, you know, like, speak to John McClellan, speak to John McClellan. And everyone was asking, well, who is this John? And why is it his responsibility to talk to us? Like, he's got nothing to do with the company. And the point I'm making here is that it was just an odd situation for Victoria to suggest that we should speak to a finance company whose primary concern is the backing of Leather Inside Out, when we were kind of making all of these allegations. So then we ended up speaking to the loan company and telling them that we're actually concerned that the charity is being used, is laundering money. And that's when things went crazy. That's when things went absolutely crazy. That's when we started getting the threats. We tried to take it to the police, and basically they told us to go to Action Fraud, an online service. So we reported it there. We reported it to the banks. We reported it to the NCA, and the NCA wrote back to us eventually and said, while this is under our remit, we're not obliged to investigate everything.
And you have evidence for all of that?
Yeah, I've got the emails. And, you know, we've been trying to report this for 3 years, and they're just like, pursue other avenues. And everyone we've reported it to has said the same thing.
So why do you think that Victoria did all of this?
For her own financial gain. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I have to sort of say, I'm pretty sure she's got money abroad that she wanted to bring in and use the charity and the companies as a cover to do it.
Right.
I think it was really important to Victoria to rebrand herself after her fall from grace. I mean, she was a very successful lawyer. She was the deputy head of legal services for the world's biggest bank for like 10 years. And it must have hurt her a lot when she went to prison, because there was a lot of media coverage around her criminality. So I think Leather Inside Out was an opportunity for Victoria to rebrand herself and position herself as a saviour to others, you know, a reformed character, helping other people along their journey. But the reality is that she was using the prison contracts as a shield to launder money, is the way that we see it.
Wow, that is an awful lot to have had to go through. And these are some really intense accusations that you guys are making against the charity. So when you made these accusations to Victoria, when you shared this with her and you say it all exploded, what do you mean by that? Like, what else happened?
So after we got the threatening letters from her lawyers, I got a call from my dad one day, and he said, the police are here and they want to talk to you. And I was like, amazing. I thought they were there to respond to the reports that Paul and I had made.
Yeah.
And my dad puts me on the phone to the police officer, and he says, I said, I'm a bit busy right now. I was actually in a cafe looking at some of the evidence with a number of members of staff. I told him, I was just like, tell me the name of the senior investigator and I'll make contact and we can arrange a meeting. And he's like, oh, no, just hand yourself into any police station. I was like, excuse me? He's like, yeah, just hand yourself into any police station. And from that moment, my heart sunk. I was like, I knew what that meant. It meant that my license had been revoked and I was being recalled to prison. From that moment on, I knew that I couldn't spend time at home because if I did, they would take me and I would be recalled to prison for God knows how long. And it would be tough trying to fight the system. So, you know, one evening in the early hours of the morning, I collected all my things and I left and I was sofa surfing and I tried to use as much time as I could to collect as much evidence and to try to appeal the decision to recall me. But the probation service refused to hear my appeal until I was inside. They said, I'm sorry, you can't appeal this from the outside, which was shocking. I just didn't know how to respond to that. There's no logic in that whatsoever. But luckily Victoria left clues about what her accusations were. She left those in the letters that she'd written, well, her lawyers had written, and to what she told the St. Giles Trust. And that gave me an indication of not just what she was saying, but how she was going about it. She was looking for things in our communication where she could make an exaggerated claim.
Right.
And I spent 79 days in the community collecting evidence. I managed to collect some of the audio recordings and videos that we took while at work of conversations and meetings. I had signed statements from members of staff. I got a signed statement from the St. Giles Trust. And there was lots of documents, emails and text messages to support my position. And I uploaded that to a Google Drive so that whoever was representing me rather, they would be in a position to provide that information and hopefully get me out. And it was just a case of time and when. And unfortunately, I was incarcerated on the 18th of March 2020, the first day of the national lockdown, and it was painful.
So, rewind again, go back a bit. So, how did you feel, Paul, after because you had collaborated together to kind of...
I felt so awful because I just felt responsible for him having his licence revoked and everything.
Did you?
Yeah, it was a bad time. And at the time, which didn't help, I was not very well, so I ended up in hospital for an operation, which was a pre-existing thing, sort of thing. So
Right.
yeah, it just wasn't a good time for any of us, really.
No, and then there was the lockdown as well.
Yes.
So that must have been quite scary
Yeah.
to have been. So you collected this evidence and you didn't hand yourself into the police for how many days?
It was 79 days before I was
79
incarcerated.
And then when you were incarcerated, how long were you potentially going to have to spend in prison? It was for the rest of your sentence? How?
Another 2 years.
It was 2.5 years because she made sure to tick all of the boxes. She's a lawyer. She knew how to beat the system. She had her lawyers write to the probation service, if I'm not mistaken, and she made sure to tick all of the risk keywords to make sure that I would get the maximum, and that's what happened.
Right.
Yeah, and I was expected to serve 2.5 years subject to appeal.
Okay, so how long did you serve and what happened with the appeal?
Well, fortunately, I spent 60 days in prison, in lockdown. It was very, very harsh conditions because it was just as the regime was changing to accommodate COVID, which means that we went days without being able to leave. It was 23 hours lockup generally. We couldn't always access a phone. Everything. It took 6 weeks just to get telephone numbers added onto my phone, just so that I could even make calls to my family. It was harsh. I expected to be there for at least a year, even if I was successful.
So the conditions of being a prisoner in the prison service during the pandemic were that you were confined to what? Just a cell? You weren't allowed
Just
to
a
speak to
cell
other...
with one other person.
Okay.
And that was quite challenging as well. I won't go into reasons why, but it was a little bit of a challenge. And yeah, it was the unknown. There were two things that really bothered me. It was the uncertainty of not knowing how long I was going to be there for, and also the sense of injustice I experienced knowing that the reason I was there was not because I had done something wrong, but it was because Victoria was trying to cover up her criminality, and that hurt me. And
Right.
and my whole family and everyone else had to go through that. And I know Paul felt bad, and it was not your fault. You know, it was Victoria's fault. She made a conscious, deliberate decision to achieve that outcome. So it's no one but Victoria's fault.
And she knew.
And the trustees.
She knew that you were going to have to spend the rest of the sentence there.
She intended that. She intended. I mean, if you look at what she wrote about me, she, you know, you could almost do an exercise. You'd be like, okay, well, she's ticked this key term for risk. She's ticked this one. She's accusing me of committing further offences. She accused me of not disclosing my parts of my criminal record, which makes no sense. I came from one charity that employs ex-offenders. In fact, I was working with the St. Giles Trust while I was in prison, so they would have been given all of my offences. So I say that there's loads or anything, but anything that was on a record would have been passed over from that point. Right. So it was a complete lie that she didn't know. She was just making up everything. But we have absolute 100% undeniable evidence that disproves everything that she has said beyond reasonable doubt.
What happened with your appeal?
So, fortunately, all of the evidence that I collected benefited me, and I won my appeal. They released me in 60 days. So it was an instant release, actually, but it happened to be 60 days that had passed. So I was incarcerated from the 18th of March to the 18th of May.
And how did you find that out? Someone came and
it was
just
amazing.
let you out?
It was a knock on the door, so to speak. They unlocked it and they said, "Mr. Savva, you've won your appeal. You're leaving." I was like, "Great, when?" "Now." I was like,
wow.
"What?" I was like, "Get your things. You're going now." And it was shock. It was amazing. I made a quick phone call to my girlfriend and my family. I said, "I'm coming home now. Like, get dinner ready." And it was an amazing feeling.
So you were being released from prison. What happened next?
Well, I wanted to determine if any of our reports had made any difference. So I did an internet search on Leather Inside Out, and I discovered that Victoria had published another article. She paid a PR company to have an article published that she wrote titled, "Prisoners are being condemned to death. Why doesn't anyone care?" And it was all about how sending someone to prison during COVID is like giving them a death sentence. And it honestly felt like she celebrated my incarceration by publishing that article, and that it was a message to me, because she knew that 2.5 years down the line I would come out and I would read that, and it would be a blow to me. It would be a sting. It was like adding salt to my wounds, and yeah, it did not. It unsettled me, and that's when I realised that I can't let her get away with this, and I started pursuing her for legal actions.
So the way that that's coming across to me is that if what you're saying is true, is that Victoria has set up a charity and written an article for the reason of getting her reputation back on track, you know, or in essence helping ex-cons, when in fact she has done exactly the opposite.
Precisely.
If what you're saying is true.
That's right.
Wow. You're pursuing her for legal actions now.
That's right. I'm suing her in the Employment Tribunal and in the High Court.
How have you done that up to this point?
So far, it's all been me. It's been extremely, extremely stressful. I didn't know much about the law. Victoria's an ex-lawyer. She's had the benefit of 5 legal teams, 2 very senior barristers. They've tried every trick in the book, lies, misdirection. We've spent basically the last 3 years on technical arguments trying to get my claims. She's been trying to get them thrown out before I could even have them heard. Okay. And it's been an uphill battle. It really affected my mental health. Even receiving emails caused me so much anxiety that I ended up being diagnosed with post-traumatic stress. Right. It's been tough. It's been really tough. And the worst thing is, if I lose the court case, I have to pay all of her legal fees, which is several hundreds of thousands.
Wow. Okay. And what has the court process actually been like for you?
It's been tough because I felt like they haven't truly listened. You know, I think it seems that, you know, the court is set upon listening to the barrister And because they provide very tidy, neat arguments, whereas perhaps in the early stages, mine were a bit more emotive, and I was just throwing as much detail as I could, and it was quite hard to focus, especially because my mental health had really suffered. And they just didn't read stuff. They were making claims, the court was making claims about something not being supported by evidence when there was evidence, and they'd missed parts of my claim entirely. And the errors they have made have been picked up by the Employment Appeal Tribunal, but it's just been a long, drawn-out, stressful process.
Well, yeah. So every time they came back to you and said that there wasn't evidence, or they hadn't read something properly, I imagine that would have extended the amount of time that it took you to get this through. Right?
Absolutely.
So how long has this taken up
3
to
years.
this point?
We're going into the 4th year now.
Since you first started pursuing this legally?
Well, yeah. So I have started this in late 2020. It's now 2023, and we're going into 2024. And some of my cases haven't even started yet. Wow. It's been back and forth on legal, technical arguments. But I have to say, though, I have won a lot of ground. I'm getting somewhere. I know she's petrified. She's petrified of the truth coming out, and it is going to come out. Like it's going to be on the public register. These cases and the facts of what I'm claiming about.
So where are you up to now at this point? What's the next step for you?
I have a hearing in a matter of weeks in the High Court, where I'm, which will hopefully decide the next steps. But I'm adding the trustees of the charity, not Paul, of course, onto my claim, and that's for malicious falsehood and defamation, which is about the false report that Victoria and Leather Inside Out and the trustees filed against me. And I want them to answer for what they've said and what they've done, and see if they can produce any evidence, which they can't.
Okay. So, what exactly do you need to do to make that happen?
Well, I have to turn up to these hearings, but what I'm really hoping is to get some public support so I can fund legal representation to level the playing field. I've set up a GoFundMe campaign. I'm raising money to fund legal representation to hopefully rebuild my life, because Victoria is going through the process of closing the charity, which means I could end up with nothing. And I also want to investigate the possibility of bringing her to justice through a private prosecution, and all of that costs money.
And how much money do you need?
I don't know. Her legal fees alone are several hundreds of thousands, so it's not cheap. But any support the public can give will be of immense help.
Wow. It
will be of immense help.
So what is Leather Inside Out doing now?
Well, Leather Inside Out, Victoria and the trustees have filed an application to the Charities Commission to close down and wind up the charity. And to my understanding, they're currently being investigated by the Charities Commission through an auditing firm called Evelyn Partners. And Leather Inside Out has disclosed that they have received £3.4 million worth of loans in the period that we were working there, and we don't know where that money has gone. And what is interesting is the company that lent Leather Inside Out the money is also in administration. Public records show that they have written off over £20 million in the period. That's not necessarily all to Leather Inside Out, I would say. And it's all suspicious because John McClellan, the guy that runs that company, was for a brief period a trustee of Leather Inside Out and has a close relationship with Victoria. So the whole thing is just looking very suspicious, but we hope that this means now that it will get picked up by the authorities and they will take a look into this and she will be held to account.
Kind of moving all of that to a close now, how exactly are you feeling at this point in the process?
For me personally, there's still a lot of uncertainty around my future because of the report that Victoria made. It's almost impossible for me to get a job. I've been trying for a long time now and I just can't. Even
though the report has been kind of thrown out because of your appeal?
It doesn't matter because there's an arrest linked to me and the accusations are linked to the report in my probation report. So I was trying to get a job in finance. I was studying another financial qualification. But any employer who's going to want to employ me for a role, who's going to look into my background, is going to see that my former employer has made allegations against me about hacking, physical violence and fraud and everything you can think of that she said. So it's pretty much impossible for me now. But I also have to say that despite everything that Victoria has put me through, I feel empowered now. And that's not despite what she did to me, it's because of it, precisely because of it. And the reason is I have discovered my strength, my resilience and my capability. It has not been easy, presenting legal arguments against, very senior barristers and putting them in a position where they don't really know what to say, and winning hearings. I've won hearings where they've applied to have my case thrown out. And that's given me a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
So I want Victoria to know that there is one thing you can't take away from me. It's the level of strength that I have determined and found in myself.
Well, I'm certain that she wasn't expecting that kind of a fight.
No, I don't think she was.
No. And if you guys could both say something to Victoria, if you had the opportunity, what would you say?
On TV? Yeah, I'd just let her know how disappointed and how disgusted we are in her actions. I mean, the original plan, the idea, the charity was a fantastic idea, and what she went and did with it is unacceptable. It's just not right. She was obviously out just to further her gains. All for her. Nothing to do with helping anybody. It was all just stories.
And that sounds like a real heartbreak to you.
Yeah.
Actually,
I mean, after what's happened to him, my brother's ended up losing his business, which he had for so many years, his reputation in the trade and whatever, because it's all linked with Victoria. It's all just gone down the toilet.
Well, I really hope with all my heart that you can rectify some of that.
Thank you.
For me, I would want Victoria to know that I oppose everything she stands for. She pretended to be someone that went through the process to reform herself, and more than that, she pretended to offer support to help reform other people, when in reality she was encouraging the very people she claimed to rehabilitate to commit further offences. And she's caused harm to everyone, and her weapon of choice was her lies and deceit. But our weapon is the truth, and we will stop at nothing until the truth comes out.
Well, Antony, Paul, thank you so much for joining me today, and I wish you all the best of luck with this case.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to us.
Thank you for having us, yeah.
Oh, you've been a joy to have on set. Thank you.
If you are willing and able to support Antony's cause, his GoFundMe can be found here. And for any updates regarding this case, his social channels can be found in the links below. Thanks so much for joining. Have a great day.